So the idea is that we will start small, but this will grow every year. So if I can count how many are we? There's probably one more coming here. Are we 12 or something like that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the ambition is to grow this every year. So we start with 12 people. Next year it will be 1,200, and 2 years from now it will be 12,000. So that's the ambition. This is being recorded, so live even. So there might be trillions of people out there watching us as well. So no pressure. Welcome. So the format is very informal. So we have 5 presenters, starting with, you can see the schedule here, and you can see also the Gultaga. Starting with Julius, sleep mode, who will talk about the usable development process. So how he is and we are using usable in our own development process. I suspect it's going to be a reasonably technical presentation, as always from Julius. So that's good. So and after Julius it will be Brian, 2 agents, 1 operator. How I ship personal projects and production work with Hermes. Hermes is an autonomous agent framework. Then we have our special guest star, Ajit Jaokar, who's not part of the team, but we'll talk about something that is very close to what usable is, context graphs. It's a concept idea that he's currently developing.
Well, it was developed or proposed by a US-based VC, and we are contributing to that. So I'll explain the context.
So there's a position paper that you will present.
That's right, yeah. So I just wanted to say it didn't originate from
No, sorry, important. So the idea is how durable decision traces, precedents, and while links become the compounding layer for institutional AI. Also, I suspect going to be technical or at least advanced. So we're going back and forth between advanced and very practical. Then we have a break, and then Jaspur will talk about how he has used the usable knowledge management to develop the national AI strategy for Faroe Islands. And finally, Jóhann will talk about usable for game development. That was the idea, at least, how he has integrated usable into Unity but other use cases as well, I suspect. So with that, I will give the floor to Julius, and he will take us to the deep end.
So we're a small venue, so I don't need to speak so loudly. But basically, what we've done, or the story on how we got here, kind of is like we started with. So we started with vibe coding, kind of, or Oliver started back last year before Tonik, and we kind of joined a bit later on, where we found out that we're experimenting on how this vibe coding works and how can we integrate that in our development workflows and so on. And we found that there was a missing piece because we were all like sharing files and having to rename and there was a lot of prep work before every project. It was very fast that we got like misaligned. That was a quick process because AI does produce a lot of code quite fast, and But the problem is that it's not aligned. So you have, for example, you build a checkout flow, and then you have 3 responses or 3 outputs. Even though you gave it the same prompt, you use the same AI, and you get 3 different answers. And that's the problem that we ran into, because we were all developing at the same time, different project, but we had like a stack in mind. We had a way of working in mind, but it was difficult to get that aligned throughout the team, even though we had these markdown files that defined this is how we do things, because there were subtle differences between each developer and so on that compounded the effect. And the reason for this is that every session starts with nothing, so a blank screen. The AI does not have any context. You have to give that context to the LLM. And going through markdown files, it can be like it lands in different places. So it does not always, it's not always put in the same place in the context. And it can, depending on the model, depending on where it lands in the context window, it can be lost and so on. So, and this doesn't matter. It's like if you start 10 conversations, there will be blank slates, all of them. So what we did, we developed a platform that you can connect your LLM to, which acts as a source for this contextual knowledge, or fills out the context window with information that's related to the problem that you're working on, with standards and all of that. So that becomes like the source for every session. So now every session starts not from scratch, but with an organizational memory that we've built up through time. And we've landed on kind of an alignment stack, so to speak. We have developed, like using usable as the grounding layer. We have developed a system where we defined a PRD. That's fairly standard, that you define the spec out when you start, because that's like where you have most control. It's easier to steer at that point. But then when you start working, it's difficult to steer the ship afterwards. So what we've done is we have a skill that basically is defined to, this is how we want this to work. This is the references and usable that you can use. And then there are steps that says, okay, when you work a plan, check the plan for, okay, how do we do this in usable? What's our standards? How do we work? And then that gets injected into the plan time, and then you say, okay, start. And that's when the development happens, and that's like where you just leave the AI and say, okay, go ahead, you can develop. And then afterwards, when this is done, when the feature or the software is done, we have a step that's commit and learn. So we let the LLM commit to our GitHub, we let it create pull requests and so on, but it also learns or commits to usable what it has learned, what it has developed, the roads where it hit snags and went a different path. All of that is captured into usable, and then the next iteration of that, where you enter plan mode, you enhance, you get that information there as well. So if someone on the team is developing something and they hit a snag and they fix it, then all the other developers have access to that same information right away. So it becomes that this is in one sweep. So you can kind of have the like the single prompt and get an aligned result from this if you follow this workflow. So that's what we've been trying to do. And if I show, for example, I have a few, there we go. So these two here, if I go back to the, here. So we have 2 different plans, and these are standard plans created by, in this case, it was Claude code, that could be Codex or some other agent. And this is a standard plan. I said, scaffold this project for me, and it went through and did the bog standard stack that most people are using, and assumed all the standard things. But we don't develop like that. We have different ways of structuring our work. So this is a plan that's been enhanced by Usable. And it basically goes through and enhances or has grounding in Usable. So it fetches the standards that we use, how we structure things, and how we use Driscoll, for example, with the so it runs through and makes these changes so it's aligned with our workflow, and then it goes ahead and you can build that. So that's one way that we work with this. Just go back to the. So basically, as I said, it's the review process of this work gets a lot simpler. Because instead of having to worry about, okay, it's using the wrong package manager, or it's using the wrong lifting framework, or this is not, we are not allowing this in our work, and so on. Instead of having to worry about that at review time, it's more like we focus on the functionality instead. So that review process is, instead of having it take an hour, it takes just a few minutes instead.
And what is the acronym LGTM?
Looks good to me.
So that's in the old world. That's what you typically wrote when you had did the pull request review, and you didn't actually do the review. You just said, looks good to me. Go ahead.
Yes. So you spend a bit more on the plan time, but you have a grounding layer that helps you do that, and not at review time, which was the case before we did it. There was a lot of review on the code, so we became the bottleneck. Instead of having the AI move fast, we could not follow along. So this allows us to follow along. And basically, this is a compounding loop, because when we do this, the more information we add, the more things we work on, the more things get added to the knowledge base, and the more things we can do from this. And this also goes into development, what happens after the code has been put into production. Because when we get, like if we get a bug or something, we have the LLM go through a investigation loop where it goes in and checks things out. It documents that investigation, the root causes and all that back into Usable, because it has the knowledge of how and why this was developed this way. And then you can compound on that and say, okay, then this was the cause for the bug, which is then fixed here, and then all of that gets added back in. So the next time a developer works on something, it has that information as well. So, and it's simple to connect. It's like you sign up, you connect, you start to capture, you can install skills through Usable if you need to create these custom workflows. You can install them manually if you want to, and then you basically watch it from now. So you just start from scratch, and you just interact with the LLM like you normally do. Just have it write it back into the knowledge graph or the knowledge base as you work. So that's how you get the compounding work. So you don't have to do like this large prep work before you go before you start. So that's basically what Usable.that is.
Then we have questions. So,
did you ever hit the problem of, you said, if we fix a snag, it then improves? But it was the other way around, that we had too many snags documented.
No, we basically, was one of our worries when we started out, because it's like, we saw it work right away when we had a little bit of, like a few memory fragments that we have in the system. So like a few documents, we find what we want, but what happens when that grows? So right now, for example, I can enter a very vague query and saying, okay, I worked on this part, can you find it? Or for example, we had a question yesterday in the presentation where we have benchmarks on this, and I can just go into Usable chat and just, what benchmark did we use on Usable? And then it finds it, even if it's 130,000 fragments in. it still finds the information. By the way, so
Can you prove that live now?
sure. On the spot.
On the spot. You can explain what you're doing here.
Yeah, I'm in usable chat. So when just started a new chat. Slow model. Fast, small model, basically.
So what benchmarks did we use on usable?
Yes. And it will go through and see what workspaces I have available, and then it will find the information. And it goes in and searches all those workspaces, and I'm trying to surface this. So it says it's found 3 benchmark workspaces, and it will check for fragments, and then it will basically says these are the ones that we did. So Craig, Beer, and Long, and Eva. So those are the benchmarks that we actually use for using. And then it will go in and basically try to find more information to give me a better answer, where it most likely will go through and get the performance and evaluation of that to show that to me as well. So this is just our what's it called? This was our demo app, basically, showing that this works. And then it kind of evolved from there to be the driver of most of these things. So it will basically says, okay, these are the benchmarks that we used. These are the workspaces that contain those benchmarks, the documents and all of that. And the same goes with PRD, for example. I did, just beforehand, I said, okay, we have a custom graph layer functionality that we want to implement. Where is that? And then it surfaces that information for me. So I can.
Could you show that fragment there? Yeah.
Yes, open it up, and this is like the information inside that fragment that details it. So there's a lot of text in these fragments, but you can find very specific things from these.
Is that text all AI generated?
Yes. In collaboration with me. So it's basically the PRDs become a conversation, basically. So for example, here I have working on data storage, basically, for having a self-contained leaf node, basically, for usable. So this was a conversation that turned into another PRD. So we can take this and then go add that through our workflow and then build on that. And again, this will pull in information and ground itself based on all our fragments that we've done.
Can you elaborate a bit on how that conversation works? Do you start very vaguely, or do you start?
Yes, I basically say, I first just asked, did we actually create one? We have a lot of fragments. I've had a few research fragments and so on, where I just did some research on various aspects. And then just start with, okay, do we have something already? And then it will find things through, and then say, okay, this is what I want, and then we will go through and create these.
So that's the text you wrote as a response to the first findings.
Yeah, yes. And here, for example, I said, okay, this is what I want. And it goes through, and I just added a different, okay, please create a team, and then I will, I want you to basically ask me questions on this. So the usable chat went through and created a team of agents where it cloned the repo and explored the repo. That's so it has it doesn't build a feature that's not connected to the repository or the code. It will pull the code in and analyze that. And while it did that, it started with a multiple choice questions on, okay, you said this, what do you mean about this? What's your
so it's challenging you.
Yes. And this was all done on my phone, so not through my laptop.
But just to be clear, we're looking at usable chat here.
Yes.
And this looks very similar to Codex or Claude or whatever coding agent you're using. But you prefer to go in here, especially in the beginning, for the PRD?
Yes.
Because the tooling here is better?
It is more interactive. that's the interaction model I use. But it's like this is like Claude Code, for example. Here I just asked it to pull that PRD and create a plan around that. So it created a plan, and this is like how the plans look, for example, for creating these tasks. And you can see here there's a lot of grounding, like you see these fragments strewn around. And there are a lot of references that are pulled in from different projects that we've made. And Codex does this a bit similar, but the structure of the plan's a bit different, because this is how Codex works, but it doesn't matter what page. Yeah.
But the whole point, one of the points is that you're creating the PRD inside usable chat.
Yeah.
It's saved into usable, but it can be then elaborated on by Codex or Claude or OpenCode or whatever you're using.
Yeah, and then you can also create the plan in that, and that gets saved to usable. So
and you can even do the programming also inside usable, although usable chat does not have the great harnesses that Codex and Claude Code had. Not yet.
Not yet.
There are things
saying not yet a lot, but
because there are lots of harnesses floating around in open source. So
that are good. So why not just use them?
So, but why are we copying the functionality of those great tools?
So for usable chat that's more integrated to usable. So it's cleaner. It's like you have more control over the actual loop itself. So that way we can better instruct it to like how do you search, or how do you, this is how we connect things, and this is like how you work. So that's a better, like we can control that a bit more on the usable chat side rather than having ChatGPT where you have to go in and modify if it should, like if the interaction should be just as good and focused like this is the primary source, then you have to modify the system prompt. And if the user has a system prompt, has a way of working, then we don't want to encroach on that. We just want to be the memory layer itself.
Any other questions? We have plenty of time, so I think I will challenge you to showcase some of the other usable chat features that you have been.
I guess my question was the same. I discussed yesterday as well. How would you see it from an end user's point of view? So we have a customer, and the customer is, what is the customer problem for which they are going to not uniquely accurate with it?
So in this case, we're talking about developers first.
And
well, that's hypothesis, correct? So that's the question in itself. Because is that a developer or is that somebody else?
Well, we have examples of people from the DevOps space using this to document or create rules, and then those are enforced. And the same with like the bridge between a developer and support. So it's those roles that will benefit us also.
So how would a DevOps person, someone that's getting
so for example
troubleshooter, how will they use it?
Yeah, we have a lot of Kubernetes infrastructure underneath this. So how do we manage that with a small team? How do we find issues fast and so on? And so basically, let's say, so basically we have this aspect of, we can go in and just start an investigation, and it has a skill that's like, this is how we work with it. And that the agent will go through and figure out what tools are available that it can use, and then investigate the infrastructure and document all of that while it's investigating, so that you have like an outage report that says, okay, this is what happened, this is the root cause, and you can challenge it, you can work with it, you can have a separate track where you go in because you know things, and then just steer the LLM and say, okay, I checked this, there's something wrong here. And then the LLM can go in that direction while it's working, it's still documenting everything.
I mean, elaborating on what Ajit asked, but basically, if I understand the standard correctly, and of course I'm marketing, but I think what we're getting most out of is that it's shared between team, that you have the compounding effect where you share knowledge across the team.
Yeah.
So also I experienced it myself when I started. That okay, Julius, I was gonna take over an assignment that Julius had, but he was gonna on leave. So I actually didn't have him available, so I could actually just ask Usable and say, okay, what was the status of this project? Where are we at? Okay, this is the status. Okay, I had a meeting with the customer and it's changed a bit in regards to that and then. Okay, good. I'd check it, and then I could actually continue the project very quickly in a stack that I also didn't know.
I'll ask another devil's advocate question here. Mainly because I've been also addressing the same problem as I was talking to Oliver as well. Is that what prevents the likes of Claude or Codex or Copilot to also do something similar?
Mostly it's the ecosystem thing. It's like when Claude is not going to create a memory that works with ChatGPT.
But why would I want to do that? I know. We had this discussion as well. That
It's because I'm using Codex and he's using Claude.
I know, but that's not a common use case, correct? I mean,
many people that are like going back and forth and using both.
Yeah. Oh, the reason why people do that is because they run out of credits.
Yeah,
that's
but,
a different.
But there is a reason. But they are doing it.
We all know that. But I'm just again, like, because I've had the same questions historically as well.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy answer in many cases.
No, it's especially nowadays. It's fast to develop things and so on. But it's like this is LLM agnostic, so it works on open source. It works on anything. So if for example you have a use case where it's like, okay, we've used OpenAI for a while. We're going to renew the contract, but we don't like it. It's getting too expensive. We are getting a better deal at Anthropic right now. This means if we have this, then you can basically switch without using all of that institutional knowledge at all.
That is the good news.
Yeah.
That I think is the valid use. I think people are going to always struggle with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Any more questions? Doesn't sound like it. Thank you. Next up is Brian. Maybe you can present yourself and.
Yes, just 1 second.
So is Langastina talking to you?
Right, yes, this is actually what I'm going to talk a little bit about. Find the presentation itself. There it was. There. All right. Oh. So, yeah, we heard a lot about how Usable has been used to kind of store knowledge and so forth. So, and what I am going to talk about is autonomous AI agents. So, who am I to talk about that? Well, so my name is Brian Bischoff, and I am the CTO of GhostTracker, a company that is in IoT, mainly container tracking. But apart from that, I am actually also founder and chairman of Usable. So I have kind of both legs in both places. So my background is as a developer. I wrote my first program when I was 10 years old on a Commodore 64. And I had my first paying job as a developer when I was 21. And
Where?
yeah, that was with Østerø, actually, right by here. And I've been a developer ever since, and I've had a couple of different roles, but always within the same kind of craft. So I've been a software architect, I've been an entrepreneur, but always in connection with development as a developer. So this is an example of my inbox this morning. And so while I was sleeping, I had an autonomous AI agent do stuff for me. And I don't know if you can see it clearly, but maybe we can have a look at it later. So, yeah, it has done some things and published some things and stuff, and completely without any direction from me. So my journey as kind of a programmer, like I mentioned, I started when I was like 10 years old, and the first programs I wrote were actually just kind of taking a manual from the computer I had bought and typing in some code and having it work, and it was awesome. And I guess in essence, you know, the act of programming is basically just to type in the codes that you want the computer to do something. And since that time, for many years, that didn't really change. The process didn't really change. So as a developer, what a part of being a developer is programming, to actually write the code. And the processes around that have changed quite a bit in the last 30 years that I have been doing this. But the actual act of programming hasn't changed that much until lately. So the first kind of big shift that, at least in my kind of journey, was when you started to get these types of type aheads in your editors. So you would write some code, you had an idea of something, and then the editor would start to predict what you were trying to do. So you could write like start a for loop, and you would have copied a variable name or something, and it would automatically kind of build out the whole text and present it to you, the for loop with the variable and everything, and you would tap it, and then it would manifest itself in the editor. Great help, awesome. It helped you program faster. But then came the next big thing that kind of changed a lot, and that was ChatGPT when that came, so generative AI. I remember the first time I heard really about it was when us three were at the Data Council in Austin, in Texas, and I think, is it 3 years ago? Yeah, 3 years ago. And we were at a talk with one of the guys that developed the type ahead feature in Visual Studio Code. He was like, okay, yeah, but now the elephant in the room, ChatGPT, it came out like 2 or 3 days before or something. And obviously that was huge when that came. And as a developer or as a programmer, basically when you kind of writing code, you would, the use case typically was that you would go into ChatGPT and make it write you a snippet of code, and you would copy it and put it in your editor, and that's fine. And so with regards to what the AI kind of did for you and what you reviewed, it was basically what you copied. And that went on for a while for me. That was the way I was kind of augmenting my journey, how I develop and make it faster. But coming to the next kind of big thing that happened was the Copilot. So Copilot was basically a model that was optimized for code writing, and it was GitHub that made it, and it integrated into your editor. So I was using Visual Studio Code, for example, and it kind of integrated into that. And that's when you started to get inline edits. So that was again kind of a big improvement. You could kind of get code written for you in your file or in your editor, writing. You could start with a chat window or kind of do prompting to it. So you would write a question, do this, and like one, it wasn't like an agent loop, but it was like a one-off thing where you kind of took suggestions from the code, from the LLM, and got them into your code. Great. Then somebody told me, well, why don't you go all the way into something a little bit more AI, like Cursor, because that came up then. It was a clone of Visual Studio Code. And what Cursor did was different. So firstly, it's more of an agent type of thing, where it has an agent loop. But it takes the focus away from the actual writing the code, and instead just makes you kind of prompt the code, describe what you need. And that was kind of a big shift for somebody like me when you have been used to writing and having control over your code completely. But still you had some sort of kind of hook into the code that was actually written, because what Cursor did, or at least that's the way I used it, it would actually, you would describe something you need, and you would get all the code changes visually, and you would see, oh, this is created a file, I did this, and then you would go in and accept all of them. You say, I like this, and if you didn't like something, you would reject it, and you would again go into the kind of AI chat and say, oh, do it differently, do like this. And that is actually how I have been working as a developer for the last year maybe. But then you kind of evolve, and you start to experience that the actual, you just go in and you basically accept everything. One of the reasons to do that is obviously because integration with tools like Usable, so that your code gets predictable, what the agent kind of delivers to you is almost always what you want, and no surprises or anything. So I started thinking about experimenting, going kind of all in on this, getting myself pulled away from the actual act of programming and just being a developer. I looked at a couple of tools and kind of, okay, how can I do that? And Claude, no, what was it called? OpenClaw came out January, yeah. And obviously we were excited about that, everybody, and we bought some Mac Minis, and we started kind of setting up our own Claudes. And I started it, and I gave up after I sat one evening, and it was a little bit complex. I thought that it didn't work straight away, and I was like, no. And yeah, maybe it was for the good, because there were 1,000 security issues with that model that they had. But I still had bought this Mac Mini, and I was still thinking, I had 1,000 projects I wanted to work on that I never had the time to work on for myself. So, well, I found something else. So I saw this Hermes project, which is an open source project that is an autonomous AI agent, and it looked quite good. And I decided to test that out. That was much easier. And my idea was a little bit, I wanted to create some sort of assistant to me that would act on my behalf and basically just do the programming for me. And that became Lengastina. So that is the persona I chose for my assistant. Can
you explain the name?
Yeah, it's a wordplay of langoustine, which is
OpenClaw.
Again, referring to OpenClaw. So the idea was that I think if you do something like this, it helps to conceptualize it with giving it kind of an identity that you can talk about and this case, it's Lengastina. I can talk to her and tell her what to do and so forth. It's just, I think it helps conceptually when you look about or think about it. And then I'm going to explain also a little bit of how this is my personal operator. I'm going into details on what it does, but I also have a different assistant, which I call Globe Tracker Assistant, and for some reason it's a he. I don't know why, but that's just, it helps me. And he is the one that I use professionally.
Yes.
So they are kind of using the same, it's the same kind of technology behind it, but they are set up very, very different.
Globe Tracker Assistant, that's GTA.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you
Granted, also.
just explain the acronym IDE?
Yeah, so the IDE is the kind of user interface to work in as well.
So, for instance, Visual Studio
Interactive
Code
development environment, I think it stands for.
Yeah. But what you're saying is that you're going from that visual environment into something different.
Into something different.
Which is more of a chat interface.
Yes. So you go away from the actual act of programming to writing the actual code. So the ones that created Hermes have a description of what it is. And they say it's not a co-pilot tethered to an IDE like Copilot that I talked about, or Claude that just connects to your IDE, and it's not a chatbot wrapper around a single API. It's an autonomous AI agent that lives on your server. It remembers what it learns, and it gets more capable the longer it runs. And that was actually one of the reasons I chose to test that one out. The fact that it gets more capable as it runs. It kind of has this type of self-learning loop where if it solves some problems, it will actually kind of create skills to do them better next time. So Lengastina, what is she actually? So for one, she has her own machine. So it's a completely isolated machine that she runs on. She runs obviously Hermes, which is the whole agent behind it. I have created a couple of accounts for her. Like I created her a Gmail account, and I created her a GitHub account, and I created her AWS account. But apart from that, I kind of gave her free reins. So I did a little bit of locking down on the AWS account, and the fact that I created this a sub account to my own personal account so that I would be able to shut it down if she went completely bananas. But other than that, she has full autonomy. I also created a 1Password vault where she could store her secrets. So that was also a way to kind of have a little bit of harnessing on her. But other than that, she had free reign. So I set it up in a way where she would be able to install things on the actual computer. She would be able to create accounts on using the browser in the Mac. And yeah, basically do whatever she felt like she would need to do in order to achieve her goals. So what has she shipped so far? So the first thing I did was to create some infrastructure stuff for me. So I wanted her to use Usable as the main memory layer. So Hermes has its own kind of memory layer, and I wanted it to use Usable as that memory layer. So I just started it up and told her, please look at this API, which was the Usable API, and create integrate this to your memory instead of your own memory layer. And that became Hermes Usable Memory, which is an open source project which is available on GitHub. And yeah, it can be installed on your own Hermes instances. Then she created some products that I have, or some applications that I have been wanting to do forever but never had the time. So one of them is Arkansas Workouts. So it's basically a workout tracker that, for me, why would you do your own? You could ask, well, I used one that kind of for many years, and it tracked all my workouts. It was great, and I like to look at it sometimes. What's my progress? But then all of a sudden, the company went out of business, and they didn't even know. They created a new application, new version of their application, and the one that I was using wasn't working, and they wouldn't migrate any data over to the new one. I even asked developers, "Can I get the data out somehow?" No, locked. So I wanted to create something that I knew that I would have forever, my own. Mickey Scorekeeper, all of these are online. You can check them out. That's a scoring app for a very specific dart game, which I didn't find any app online. So I wanted it, so I asked it to create it. And it has a tons of projects. She has a blog. I'll send the link is in the last slide. She when she has done something, she typically writes a blog like this. So there are references to all the projects she's made. She's made around 10 different projects since I started with.
Is there a blog post about this presentation?
Not yet, no, but probably tomorrow there will be. So she has set up with like a dream state, I call it. So every night she kind of goes through all the things she has done during the day. And if she kind of resonates that, this is worthy of a blog post, she will create a blog post and post it. So that is something that I've instructed her that this is what you should do, but you should do it if you feel like it. So like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I have very, very soft guardrails for her. So I have done some kind of ruling when I set it up, like I want you to do commensurate limits. I want to be able to kind of have versioning of the things that you do, and I want to be able to see, are you doing any breaking changes to any APIs or something. So I instructed her to do some stuff. I also, because she might by mistake, start to publish something on GitHub, I set her to say, okay, use private repos per default, and then kind of as you go along in the project, you can decide to kind of make them public, like with the usable memory plugin, for example, which she also did automatically.
Again, she has her own GitHub account.
She has, yes, and that is kind of one of the most important parts of it. It is not connected directly to my own personal things in any way. Everything is kind of her own. Push went on. So when I first started, it kind of always came to loop to kind of accepting pushes and all of that I needed to do something. And then I started, no, just go ahead. You have full autonomy to push. And what it actually means is that she also sets up, obviously, ways to deploy things and everything. So she has the full access to the AWS CLI. So she has access to my DNS also. So she actually controls the DNS also. So when she creates a new project, she will do all those things. And typically it's done through GitHub Actions. So she creates actions in GitHub that actually kind of deploy everything for me. The last thing I instruct her to do is, when you're done and with anything, write it back to Usable. So I can keep kind of track of what happens through Usable. So I can basically ask in Usable, what are you actually doing? So second use case is the GTA or the Globe Tracker Assistant. That one is the same, but also very, very different. So that one, I wanted something because with my experiences, so Langostina was the first one I created, and I could see this is immensely useful and also useful in my job. So I wanted to create something that I could use there, but there are tons of more considerations to think about. There it's kind of, it gets serious and you can't just play around, and it doesn't just affect you if she goes completely bananas, the agent. So I created an agent with the same kind of engine, the same memory layer, same Slack interface. That's how I kind of communicate with it, but a very different harness. So for one, I mean, the setup. So when I set the Langostina up, it's on my personal Mac Mini at home that kind of has access to install programs or whatever, whereas the Globe Tracker assistant has a workstation with all the restrictions that come with that. It's set up on a Linux machine in this case, and without any sort of elevated access. So I basically have to install something if it's needed. It's set up with work email and workspace, with a GitHub account that is connected to the company, but it only has very few rights. It doesn't have rights to kind of merge into main branches and so forth. It only has kind of access to that. It doesn't have access to any sort of kind of server setup like AWS, but that is also not really needed because everything in the company is running with GitOps. So changes to infrastructure go through Git and pull requests anyways, which she does have access to. And then she has kind of another way to reach out to the world through MCPs. So she has access to Atlassian, for example, because that's the enterprise kind of task management we use. So Jira, for example, and also some information in Confluence. And ground cover is the kind of observability layer. So this agent has access to see if the services that we deploy are working, or to look at metrics and stuff. So that is the access, and like I said, everything is kind of branch protected and review gated. So it is not possible for this agent to kind of deploy something that hasn't been through some sort of review or some gating that is required in this company. So what does this assistant do for me? Well, for one, it does repo audits for me. So it has access to the GitHub, and it can pull down all our 600-ish repositories and do audits on them. And why can it do that? Well, it has access to Usable, which we have been using for over a year in the company. So we have all our policies and all of these ways of working and requirements and all of that is in Usable. So it has access to kind of see all that. So that is one thing it does for me. It does issue work, so it can pull automatically tickets from Jira. It can also be assigned tickets in Jira and start working on them that way. It does manifest pull requests, meaning that once it has done some issue work, for example, and it has gone through a review, it is able to deploy it basically by doing pull requests into our manifests. Again, that goes through the human loop, so there is approval mechanisms there. Other things that are interesting is smoke tests, because that is something that is very useful to kind of test these and these services, make sure that they are working. Just that. When we have production issues, because he has access to ground cover, which is our observability layer, and she knows everything about the services that are deployed. She knows the code and the actual kind of requirements and the service map. Everything is in Usable, so it is very good at doing issue triage, kind of figure out if something is wrong. And then on a more kind of low-level kind of thing, it manages my calendar. So it doesn't have direct access to my inbox, for example, because again, it's set up with its own thing, but I am able to do forwarding to it and ask it to kind of archive this or do something like this. I have some more harnesses in for that, because that is a little bit dangerous when you do something like that. And then she can book meetings for me, which is really nice. So I can tell it, because it has delegated access to my calendar, so I can tell it, find a meeting next week for this and this guy. I need to talk about so and so, and it will be able to, if there is information usable, to pull that and augment the meeting with that. But otherwise, find when do I have free time? When do I? It also can actually see my private calendar also. So it's busy in my private calendar, so you can see if I am available at any given time. So basically, instead of using something like calendar. So the idea is that it's kind of the same engine, but the work is more real and actually something that affects others than me. So the harness is really tight, and there is a complete audit trail of everything that she does through the memory plugin. So all the prompts that it gets, everything gets audited. So basically, it's you can go back if something go wrong and actually see what happened and what it had. So this is basically the MCP service. So this is how it kind of can connect to other things compared to like Astina, which has full access to everything. So it has a very kind of limited, and it's typically just through MCPs that it can talk to the world. So that's kind of how it's controlled. These are some of the things that we have. So we have usable Højgaard, Google Workspace, and so it's manageable, but it's very useful. It's the tools that we use in the company. So again, with the harness kind of thing, so we use feature branches and pull requests for review. It has all these types of kind of audits that run daily, So to compare the two, it's kind of go completely nuts on like a streamline GTA is just, you can't really do anything that is out of bounds. So when I prompt them, so when they don't kind of do things out of their own, so to speak, I simply just use a Slack connection. So it could be that I would send them, have a go at this ticket. So that was actually yesterday, I think somebody assigned a ticket to me about investigating some specific thing, and I just sent it to him and actually solved that one. And the same for my Lagastina is typically, I would go into the workflow is typically that I find some project like this labor is kind of online version of Jaspur, the bingo game that we have for islands. And the way I do it is typically like Julius showed earlier. I go into usable chat and I end up creating a PRD, break it up to plans, and then it's stored in usable, and then I go into the chapter and say, okay, start working on this project, and it just takes one task and start to work on it. That's typically how kind of they work under my instruction. And the same goes for in the GTA, that typically the kind of descriptions are in usable, but in this case it's actually a Jira ticket. So the Jira ticket has the information that it needs to solve the problem. And then replies the same, they get back into Slack, but they are also saved in usable. So I can also use the usable chat to kind of figure out what did you do yesterday, for example. It can kind of pull it from there. So that's the receipt part of it. So kind of two very distinct operators, but they have the same memory layer. And the big difference is the work plane. So the cockpit is the same, and the operator is the same, but or the memory layer is the same, but kind of how they are set up is very, very different. And the pillars it's built on is the load bearing is that it has memory. So it has information on basically everything, and that's especially true for the work one. That it needs to know how are we deploying things, how are things set up, what are our policies on this, what are special things I need to consider when I create something. So all of that is in the memory. And the reach out of the agent is typically through MCPs. And again, like I said, with Astina, she has more free range, but the control one is through MCP and the cockpit is Slack. So memory without MCP is a diary. So, meaning if you just have a memory and you don't have some way to kind of pull the data, like with usable, where you have an LLM in front of it, in front of the memory, it's kind of not usable. An MCP without a memory is a forgetful intern with admin credentials. This is something that Langerstein actually came up with. I think it's a great comment. So why did I choose the Hermes agent for this instead of something like OpenClaw or something? It seemed like a thing that it has. These are kind of the things that the major features of it, and like I said earlier, the most important one for me was this fact that it grows on its own. But when it solves something, it automatically creates skills that it feels like it, and you can actually, if you plug into so that's what I could see when I had the memory system. If you plug into the agent, you can see what it actually does. Every time, after every iteration it has, it goes in and says, look at what you just did. Is there a learning from this? Should I create a skill and so forth? So that is actually something that's built into this agent. It has all the features that you would need from an autonomous agent, like scheduled automations. It has access to a web browser if you allow it, which is tremendously helpful because it can test the things that it builds itself as a real user. It has real sandboxing. It can start things inside of Docker and use SSH. It has all these advanced hardware features, and has the kind of, for me it's Slack to communicate with it, but it also has other channels. And it's very good at delegating tasks. So both my agents, so the GTA agent has both Codex, and it has Claude, and it has Copilot. It can kind of just delegate to whatever coding agent it feels is the best, and it's pretty good at kind of doing it that way. So if you want to get started with something like this, what should you think about, in my opinion? So for me, I think the most important part is that you have some sort of memory layer. So this is where you can kind of instruct it with your skills and everything. If you have that, it just makes it so much easier. Also, if you want to kind of switch to a different type of agent. I would move the prompt to a chat channel. So that goes again to the fact that I was talking about with this programming as opposed to being a developer and just making things. Move it to a chat. Just forget about the code for a while. Try it. It's fun. Give it its own identity. So make sure that you kind of don't connect it to your own accounts, because it can create havoc very quickly. And then the scoping. Like with the two examples, I had one that was completely free range and one that this didn't. I think you need to figure out where in this kind of spectrum are you, or can you allow. I would say if you aren't a developer that can easily see and have a feel of what it's doing, then you should probably not go to the let it rip kind of side for it. You should probably have it much more controlled. But on the other hand, it's more fun to kind of just let it rip. So two operators, one memory layer, same playbook, but different harnesses. That's basically the takeout from that.
Yeah. So what would be like the cost of for some Langerstein? Personal agents or the little services and subscriptions.
Good question. Yes. So when I set it up, I signed up for the first one. So it needs a model. So you have to have some sort of subscription where you can use a model. And I think I took the OpenAI first, and just a regular $20 ChatGPT subscription, which was not enough. It was already not enough on the first day. So, but on the first day, I did a lot of things because I implemented the memory layer, which it had to work on, and it also started on 2 projects. I was very excited. So I moved it to $100 subscription, and that is fine for now. But I also set up a Claude subscription, just so it could switch, but that was a $20. So right now it is costing $120 for that. And on the AWS side, I kind of so the first thing I instructed it to do was to create the blog so you can have a record of what it was doing, which was a very simple deployment and S3 and CloudFront, and it kind of figured that out on its own. But then when I started to do more advanced services, it figured, well, you use Kubernetes and everything else you do. I'll start up a Kubernetes cluster. And this is what I talked about earlier. If you know or have a feeling of what it's going to do, then probably you can let it ride. But if you don't know what you're doing, then it can be very costly. Because it did start that up, and that was at least, I think, $200 a month for the Kubernetes cluster. And it created space, spun everything up, and it was fine. I let it do it, and I looked at it and I said, no, that's not how we're going to do it. So I told it, do one simple, small EC2 instance, deploy it with Docker Compose, which got the cost down a lot. And it actually has created a blog post about this on the webpage. What I did was I instructed it to look at the AWS APIs, and they have a prediction engine where they can predict what is your cost going to be. So they look at what do you have running on your account, and so every morning it sends me a message saying, I expect your cost to be so and so by the end of the month, and today the cost is so, and the cost is 0 at the moment. And the reason the cost is 0 is because I created a new account and it uses the free tiers in Amazon for everything. And it also, so when I started several projects, it also figured, oh, you deployed it this way, I'll deploy it the same way next time. So it created a new EC2 instance every time it created a new service. And that's also where, again, I know AWS and how it works. I just went, no, don't do that. Just use the same EC2 instance. There's more than enough room on it, and it's within the free tier, so it's like a micro instance. But yeah, so if you know what you're doing and you then you can kind of control it, but I guess it can be dangerous if you just let it. Yeah. Yeah, so usable is $20. Yeah, so yeah, for the features that I use, yeah. So yeah, if we count it up, it's like $160 a month for this.
So I counted to that one. I tried using paper tests, spinning multiple agents up and so. I managed to burn through the equivalent API cost of $6,000 in a weekend.
6,000.
Nothing.
So that was paperclip, which is an alternative to Hermes.
Yeah, and then that did nothing. I just stopped it because it couldn't even finish it.
Yeah.
It was just spending tokens like crazy. It was, of course, within a subscription, so I didn't have to pay those $6,000.
I was just waiting for that. I really spent the $6,000.
But we really spent, how much was it? It was like $6,000 on Cursor back in November.
Yes, yeah.
That was the
now
whole
we
team.
moved away completely from Cursor.
And we just moved away from Cursor.
Yeah.
It's too crazy.
Why was that?
No, but it was running wild. It was like there were overages that we were paying for.
Yeah, and then it was like that's an issue with if you don't manage the model selection, you just go with it. For every task, you just.
But I can maybe add to that Hermes has a very kind of you can use almost any model for Hermes, and I tried using the Gemma, the local one, because of on the Mac Mini, but I didn't really get the.
It's not that good at programming.
That I expect from.
Try something like Qwen?
I didn't try that, no, but that might be better. So
Julius, you tried Qwen.
Yeah,
I did try Qwen. It's the issue for me was the startup time. It's like the first interaction time is slow, especially for something like Hermes, where it's like it runs, there's a loop and all that, runs on drawings and so on, so it goes to see it and you start interacting, and that's, like, it's, especially when these subscriptions are available, it's less of a, if you don't do something that's very critical with information sensitivity, then it doesn't.
So you mean when locally?
Yes.
Yeah, locally.
Yeah.
And you think that the startup time was longer?
Yes, but that again depends on how the model is loaded, the memory machine and that.
But also it depends on your use case. I mean, in some cases, if you are okay with the startup time being longer,
Yeah.
then you could work with it.
Yeah. But again, if you don't need that information security, if you don't mind doing going to the cloud to get inference costs, and you have a subscription, and you get more of that subscription.
I mean, so Hermes is actually also very much configurable. So the different things that it does, you can actually choose different modules. So if you have some tasks that don't require anything else, then like a local model that is simple and not costly, you can do that. So you can actually you can configure it for almost all of the things that it does.
I did try with creating clones just to have those.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So you don't experience it.
So if you, but I mean, for me, I mean, it's obviously like $200 almost per month, but this, as it was something I wanted to explore, like to really see what can you do, and then.
So you just connect your credit card directly to.
No. So those were the first harnesses I talked about. So the way I did it was that I created a.
Yeah, credit card account for it, right?
Well, yeah, you can. and maybe it will sign up at some point on its own. But you could, for example, do something like Revolut to create a card that was restricted, only had like something, and just give it to it. I might do that later on, when I'm a little bit more confident on it. To say, okay, you have this amount of cash that you can use for services. If you feel
There are actually services that provide a way for users to create credit cards.
But right practically for the AWS account, what I did was I have an organization, which is my personal organization, and then I created a sub account, which is a complete its own account, but it's isolated, and the billing goes to the parent account, and I can set limits. I haven't set limits actually, but I can set.
Can you elaborate a bit on Globe Tracker? Of course, people in here, some people know about the organization, but it is a relatively, in Faroese terms, a larger organization.
Yeah,
it's like an enterprise security issue for you.
It has some 50 employees. It does monitoring and control of refrigerated containers. So it's a hardware device that's put on the container that can control the refill. It has around something like 300,000 containers tracked.
Yep.
So it's a quite large enterprise and a lot of data. And so it is. That's why I said around the harnesses and so on, it's important that it doesn't do anything crazy.
Any more questions? Well, thank you. Now, it's Ajit. You just have to live with the law doing programming here in the background.
I don't think I'm just having to have a document, it's what the index is. Right, so.
So, I think you can introduce yourself.
I
And
think there is much of this is the best.
you just control it here.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I don't think I have to move this for my height or anything like this. It's all right. Do I have to?
It was more of like there was an echo before.
Okay.
Because
Okay, that's good. Good morning and nice to be here at the first usable conference. So I'm going to present something different, and I spoke about this with Oliver, and I also shared why we are doing this at Oxford, and also personally with my own startup as well. And the way I work generally at Oxford and generally in my work is that if I find something which is very interesting, we quote unquote invest in it because we are interested in our students, we are interested in that becoming a big trend. And late last year, I found this thing by this VC called context graphs. And I immediately it resonated with me. But interestingly enough, I'll tell you why it resonated with me, but interestingly enough, I initially had got the concept wrong. And I continue to refine it in my own mind. And what I'm presenting here is a sort of a position paper about this idea based on their work, based on their posts, and various interactions and discussions I've been finding out. And then in the end, I'm going to share about how we are trying to apply this. Okay? So this is the idea with the thing. And what struck me was it is built as $1 trillion opportunity. By the way, the person who posted it is a VC, and they I think we were the first investors in Netflix, something like that. So it's a serious player from San Francisco. But I didn't more look at that. I was thinking more about it as a concept. The reason I was interested in it because we experimented with Neo4j for a while, which is knowledge graphs, correct? And for knowledge graphs, we work with that in the course. We work with that with LLMs and knowledge graphs. And at some point, we came to the conclusion that it was a bit of an overkill with what we were trying to do. Yes, so for us, for if you had a company with sort of like a Vodafone or something like that, maybe that was fine. For our use case, we didn't think it needed such a relatively expensive product. And we could essentially build what was a knowledge graph, essentially see the pointers, correct? And you would navigate those pointers, the nodes and edges. So we also had an experience with something called causal graphs, which is not so commonly known. I don't think how many people know about causal graphs. So causal graphs are a mathematical concept. They were originally positioned or talked about by the Turing Award winner Jaspur. So Jaspur proposed the mathematics behind causal graphs in 1982 in his Turing Award presentation. And since then, about 2 or 3 decades later, especially post LLMs, some of those ideas have come into picture. And the reason why causal graphs are interesting is because causal graphs solve a very major problem in machine learning. And that problem is that machine learning and of course deep learning and anything else is only correlation and not causation, correct? So you might have heard this expression, correlation is not causation. If you're in machine learning or data science, you definitely would have. But then what is causation, right? How do you know cause and effect of something? So the whole sort of the knowledge, the concept, causal graph concept was based on this idea that how do you determine the cause of something and the effect of something? And how do you kind of model that into a model? So we had this experience, and then we saw this thing called context graphs, and I thought that this is an interesting idea. And I first of all, the mistake I made initially was to look at it from the lens in which I was most familiar with, and the lens I was most familiar with was knowledge graphs. Right? So I looked at it as a sort of a modeling, a data modeling kind of situation, and then applying the context to that. Now, that was a limited view, which I subsequently realized with that. So the best way to explain this concept, which I'm going to explain to you first, as I understand it, and again to clarify that it's not originating from me, but I'm applying it in a specific context, which I will explain later on. The best way to understand it, okay, there are 2 points. The first point is to understand what it is, and the second point is to understand why is it a $1 trillion opportunity, correct? So the first point is that it is positioned as a decision exhaust, not a data representation. So a knowledge graph is a data representation, right? So you've got your nodes and your edges and things like that. A decision exhaust doesn't exist in an organization. It exists into different silos. Right? It exists into your various ERP silos, your whatever else you do within that. But there is no, given a decision, given a phenomena, you do not record why you made that choice in the organization. Yes.
Can you elaborate on exhaust? What?
Yeah, the exhaust meaning the same sort of thing. Is that when you say that I go through that. So exhaust meaning that why did I reach this decision? Why did I approve this loan? Why did I not approve this loan? Kind of stuff. It exists sort of as a output, but it doesn't exist as your reasoning process.
So you get the decisions, but not the reasoning behind it.
Correct. This is what was meant by the decision, the data exhaust or the decision exhaust. And the question was that if that is holistically captured, then it is actually the killer of the SaaS models. Correct? And that's where it is talking about a $1 trillion opportunity, because there is now since January due to Claude, specifically due to Claude, the SaaS companies have at least had a 20% share of their stock price. That includes HubSpot, that includes everybody else in that category. So that sort of that point where Claude started to say we can do this easily, and we can do things like replace COBOL programmers that drop 20%, whatever, over 5 years, sort of, right? So it's sort of positioned in that direction to say that it is the sort of thing which SaaS does in various pieces, but that you can now do that across an organization, and a learning mechanism for the organization, meaning that if you are able to capture this information as a bedrock, it then becomes your core IP of the organization, which makes it extremely interesting. Now, I applied it into certain other contexts, which I will not explain into more detail, because those clients I cannot disclose what I did with them. But I was impressed with the concept. I was thinking about this idea that based on our previous experience with knowledge graphs, puzzle graphs, that type of stuff, I thought this thing had legs, even if it was not going to manifest itself fully. And I'm going to present that a little bit. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it was more like the SaaS companies are losing value because people are thinking that Claude and others are going to replace them.
Yes.
And that you can get Langostina to do anything you need, any SaaS solution you need. But what you're addressing is actually that SaaS typically is a system of record.
That's what I was looking for in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was talking
system of record. Yeah. So that's that. SaaS is capturing data and presenting data and processing data. But what you're focusing on here is the decisions behind the data, which the SaaS companies don't even
capture.
Yeah.
So to speak. Yeah. I just write this word system of record because I was trying to talk about that even this morning, and I couldn't remember that word, system of record. Yeah. So coming back to this sort of discussion now, and what I've done is I am writing this position paper which I have not yet published, but I just sort of highlighted important points there, and at some point by the time next week I will hopefully say something. So enterprise AI is an inflection point. The most valuable thing that an organization produces is not data, but a collection of decisions accumulated pattern of how judgment is actually applied. So this is the sort of the opening perspective of that. And then it talks about the absence of an event clock. Correct? So it says that there are three core principles, three core propositions. First of all, there is an absence of an event clock. That is, the systems capture the state, but not the reasoning. So that is the meaning of that. The second one is that the solution is not better retrieval, but structured learning through agent trajectories. So now that also applies to agents. So agent trajectories, agents are a mechanism to build that exhaust, so to speak, right? So it's the same as what I think we were talking about this morning as well with that. And the third one is that context graphs become the organizational world model. Now, world models, I don't know how many people are following world models, but we are definitely following them. And this is the sort of thing that Jan Kuhn has been talking about. This is the sort of thing that 5.5E has been talking about, and a few other people, and of course, NVIDIA as well. So for us, this is the sort of, it is bringing a few ideas which we have been kind of talking about, and it connects. When I say we, I'm talking about Oxford, I'm also talking about my own startup in general, of the sort of horizon scanning I do with things.
So just to reiterate, the 3 points you have is that you need something that captures reasoning. That's one.
Yeah.
The second one is that you want the agents to plug in directly into the system, so that
what I'm saying
so the agent can read and write.
Correct. Yes, but the question is that what the agent does, and it doesn't necessarily do that currently. Correct?
No, but it should.
It should. Yeah.
And the third one is that you have these world models, which is as like you've been working a lot with digital twins, but it's a digital model of the world, and that you're working on that model, and that's part of the mix. So those are the three items.
The simulation world. And this is exactly. So for us, it ticks a number of boxes, which we've been working on into the sort of research space within Oxford, and for us that is why it was of interest, and it could be high. Correct, and we all know these things. They could go whichever way, but we think that there is something here to be interesting. And again, to reiterate, I am not the originator of this idea. I am trying to keep it as clear to the original concept, meaning that I'm not trying to sort of. It's important to keep that source of truth with that, because somebody has said in a specific way. So then, first of all, the two clocks problem. So every system has a state clock and event clock is what happened in what order and crucially why. So this bit is not being captured. So this is the point about it. Correct? So in an organization, you sort of do not actually have this trace of information. And the config file say that, for example, config file says timeout happened at this time. Somebody tripled it, and why the reasoning is gone. So that's the thing. So you did something, but you don't know why you did it. That's the first point. And actually, connecting a large language model to an enterprise data actually routinely disappoints, meaning that just putting an LLM on top of it without having that substrate actually is a recipe for failure. And this is actually when we started to get involved into that. So I'm going to sort of talk about it in the end of what I am trying to do. And we proposed an idea called an anti-pilot. So the idea is that everything languishes in the pilot world, in the LLM space. And you almost want to say that with an MIT report is 95% of AI initiatives die or something like that. And then we said, how can you not do that at an enterprise level? So that's why we sort of took the word anti-pilot, which is not a pilot, but it is something different. So this is how this is where I was starting to interest with that. So if you plug in an LLM into that, how can you make it useful? So then the question is, there is something called a fragmentation tax, meaning that you require human reconstruction reasoning that was never treated as data. So different functions use different tools. Therefore, there is already a fragmentation within the enterprise, and there is a quote-unquote fragmentation tax before you are actually capturing this context. And the question is why is the context not captured? Correct? So, and that is why you start off with the concept of fragmentation tax, but you also start off with a few other things. The first one is that there is only partial observability of anything within the enterprise. The second one is there is no universal ontology, meaning there is no universal kind of a structure within that. And the third one is things change. And the fourth one, which I have mentioned somewhere below, is people do not like to be accountable. Surprisingly. so and it's a very real problem. Because
did you say accountants or accountable?
Accountable.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, because if you want to capture the reasoning behind everything, in reality, in organizations, this is exactly the opposite of things people do. Right? And this is the psychological thing. Right? So it's not.
There's a term called "cover my ass." That's a part of it. So if you're accountable, you spend a lot of effort just not being held accountable.
Yeah, and I actually worked in an organization which used a phrase called sloping shoulders. meaning that nothing ever rests on your shoulders. It always goes somebody else. But it's an important point, right? I mean, I'm saying something quite serious for the
Yeah.
that. So now you come down to the question of that it is not more memory or not MCP or not any of those technical things, but it is something else. And it is not. So the point is that by the way, they are funding a large number of startups in this space. So I keep looking at these a whole ecosystem of startups who are starting to talk about context graphs. And most of them are in verticals. So they are in pharmaceuticals, they're into something with that. And that again is a pointer to me. It's a kind of an indirect question I asked you guys when I saw your demo with that. So the question then is that it is not a graph database, it is not a Neo4j, it is not a vector store, and stuff like that. So the question then is, how are they built? So they are built using walkers, informed walkers. So essentially that the agent is the sort of mechanism which is doing that. Now there is something called random walks in mathematics or any of these sort of theories. So it is not exactly a random walk because an agent does something with some intention, with hopefully, but it is a recording of the cookie trail within those walks with that. So it's almost that this idea doesn't work without the agents because it's an amalgamation of the substrate layer and the agentic layer, which is the action layer. So the substrate layer is the crumbs layer, which is capturing the decision exhaust. The agent layer is the one which is wandering around and trying to do something.
So can you elaborate a bit on the crumbs? My thinking is, if you record every meeting,
yeah,
and transcripts of the meeting and get that in,
yeah,
if you record all the interactions that are in email threads,
yeah,
and get that in, then you start to get
correct,
the crumbs.
Correct. So I think that usable, you already said that is doing some of those functionality.
Yeah.
So that's why I am presenting this subject here, because I think that there was some discussion in my mind, and this was before I spoke to you, or I knew what usable was doing with that. And after we spoke on the phone, I decided on the Zoom, I decided maybe I talk about this because it's a way for me to learn as well. Right? So this is what I'm trying to do. So the other bit is about ontology. So the tricky bit about ontology also has the same problem. So I assume that you know the word ontology. If you not, you just search it. And I don't know how would you describe the word ontology.
Ontology is more like a dictionary or some kind of where you agree what things mean.
Yeah.
So a business ontology is like a dictionary of, in our organization, these words mean this.
So I was going to use the word lexicon, but again, it's a slightly complex English word. But again, I think if you search, I think what you said is exactly right. The question is then whether do you use the prescribed ontology or you do learned ontology. So a prescribed ontology is something like Palantir's Foundry, for example. So that does define an ontology. But in this case, it's trying to say that you're also learning the ontology itself as the agent is traversing with that. So again, we these things are all interesting for us because we've kind of quote unquote burnt our fingers with knowledge graphs with that. We understood some of these things with that. And then there are the sort of, it is not a decision trace versus a trajectory log. And then the three conditions that must arise, which is essentially that the decision surface must be legible. That means you must be able to identify what it is, the triage, whatever you're trying to do, what the decisions are. The second one is you must capture friction management. So there's a whole bunch of things which include things which cannot be captured easily. And then there is the context, quality, and currency, meaning that how fresh it is and so on and so forth with that. So then you come to the thing that you do essentially that the most powerful claim in the foundation graph framework is the reframing of a context graph not as a retrieval system as a world model. So what do we mean by world model? The world model is a learned compressed representation of how the environment works. So it's essentially a simulation of the larger ecosystem. It includes the dynamics, it includes the prediction, and it includes the cause and effect. So this is where the causal business starts to come along with it as well. So it is not just a simulation is a text of understanding. If your context graph cannot answer what if, then it is just a search index, right? So this is why we were also interested. This is another box we tick for us, because this what if is a classic causal concept. Causal mechanisms are something called counterfactuals as well. So counterfactuals are exactly that. What if I increase something by something, what would happen? Would the decision be reversed? At what point do I reverse the decision if I increase something by 10%? Something of that nature. And of course, you've got multiple factors which lead to that.
So world models, it's reasonably easy to understand when we talk about the physical
Yes.
world.
Yes.
But I presume you're also talking about processes and how things are working in the organization.
Similar idea.
Yeah.
Similar idea. I mean, of course, it's not the physical world.
Yeah.
But it is a similar idea that you are modeling everything which works, and everything which works that is connected to each other, and everything which is impacted by something else, because you actually need that to understand the impact of the decision with that. Because decisions are not one step; they are multi-step. Right? So you have to think about it from that perspective. That's how I interpret that. So then you also look at the sort of the world model approach, what it means. It also talks about agents and what it's the sort of thing which you kind of, it's a cognitive architecture, and it's a classic example of people give that what does an agent, what does an employee do when they learn something new or they're doing something with that. So then the bit about the compounding comes into play, which has been talked about in the usable context with that. And what are the strategic implications? Obviously, for enterprise AI practitioners, AI researchers, and investors and platform builders, and so on and so forth. So the question here is that if you look at from a critical assessment point of view, the two clocks framework is digital exhaustive, genuinely clarifying, a very interesting perspective. The agent as informed workers is also a key insight with that, and the simulation criteria is also a key insight. And of course, the things which require strengthening are that essentially the governance and the incentive problem. People do not want their reasoning to be auditable. This is exactly what I said with that. So it is a nice thing to have, but is this really?
Why are we doing this? Because I say so. That's it.
Yeah. So again, you see the problem, what the problem is, right? So it is exactly that. And then there is some more things around the sort of the hype cycle, the Bayesian stuff. I won't go into that. And then there is a tacit knowledge problem. So this actually is in the reinforcement learning world. I don't know how many people follow reinforcement learning, but this is actually defining the state, the action, the reward, and the next state. Is actually a core part of reinforcement learning. The reinforcement learning is what Google did with the AlphaGo type of thing, correct? So it's that classic kind of learning by blundering, learning by trial and error. Yes. So the question is that it's not a new idea and has been around for some time. And how are we? So this idea of the agent learning stuff, things. But the difference here is that maybe the agent is sort of more directed as opposed to reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is based on this classic concept of exploration versus exploitation. Right? It's like the classic cow which can only eat in one pasture, but then it would exhaust the pasture, so she needs to go to the next pasture. So now I conclude with the final point. I really like this, correct? So I am presenting it in a neutral perspective, but we are certainly seriously looking at this because we think there are certainly interesting ideas. I will put this into a more final thing. And what I'm trying to do is apply it to what I call the anti-pilot concept. So what I'm trying to do is trying to understand, that is why I asked you the question as well. So we are trying to position it as enterprise pilots with that. And if you think about that, and then what we're trying to do is reframe domain knowledge in terms of context graphs. So we are looking at this whole low code course at Oxford, and we have a pretty good track record of doing that. I mentioned about Magnus and people like that. So my starting point was that if I'm a domain expert, what is the mechanism to quantify my domain knowledge in such a way that agents will be able to use it best? And this is where I blundered into that. So that is what I'm trying to do, and applying it to a more of an early stage prototype concept with that. And I have actually applied it within enterprises. I cannot say the name, but again, I can tell you that what I liked about it is we don't have a tool, or I'm sure that it exists something, but I didn't use a product. I didn't use something like equivalent of a user tool. We just created it basically with our own whatever lovable and Superbase and essentially a few more tools from that. But what I understood is people relate to that. People who have domain knowledge relate to this idea, because I'm not talking about coding, I'm not talking about anything else. I'm talking about things they do, the decisions they make. There is a psychological question, and I don't want to be sort of tied to the historical decisions I make. But if I frame the problem as saying that I want to understand what is the decision stream, this is a conversation. People have this conversation, and it is possible to do. So we are actually quite investing into this at Oxford, and that concludes my talk. Thank you. Yeah. So take any questions. So there's no agenda, there's no product or something like that I'm trying to say. It's just that it's a research topic I am a researcher essentially.
So I have 100 questions, but I prefer if someone else opens the party. Jaspur? So if I look at usable, so it's good at capturing decisions, at least in the development process. So that's very much what Julius and Brian were describing. But it's not capturing everything. It's not capturing all the breadcrumbs, all the meetings, and all the small talk that you. So there's work to do there. But more importantly, what you're adding to the mix is the world models, because we do not have that at all. There are no world models in usable, but that would be another augmentation of it.
True. So there are a couple of points here. The first point is the world models, definitely. The second point is the intent. That is the primary, for me, this is the primary reason for that. And the third point is something I mentioned even previous discussion with, and I don't want to kind of contradict you, and I know everybody's a developer. I think developers are poor customers. Developers are poor customers. They are not. It's very hard to sell to developers unless you are a Microsoft, unless you are a Meta or stuff like that. You've got deep pockets. I find that it is much easier to sell to a domain expert or a vertical, and that I think is where we are positioning it in our mind with that. And I see that same thing being positioned. I see the startups getting the funding. They're all one by one targeting a vertical, whether it's insurance or pharma or something like that, because that I think is what my experience is. I can talk to a domain expert. I did this in certain domains, specifically something around cyber, but I can relate to that. People relate to that sorry, you have a question. Yes. Yeah. I know it was a controversial thing to say developers are poor customers.
No, that's fine. But I was kind of thinking of elaborating on this because I'm the next speaker, and of course I'm actively working with creating the national AI strategy, and that what you're saying, 95% of pilot projects fail, because that's something as we as a nation probably should do some pilot projects. So it's kind of interesting tapping into that anti-pilot, because I think also, if I understand the concept correctly, it requires deep knowledge of what you are as a unit or a country in this, and probably also needs some documentation of what are your processes, what is it we're looking into. And as a small country, I don't think we're good at measuring gains when we implement stuff. We have not that well documented processes because it takes effort to do that because of lack of.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll tell you one other problem which is not so well articulated, and we are both at Oxford and my startup, and also working with customers. The problem is not that people are not prepared to say something. The problem is that they are not aware of the interdisciplinary aspects of stuff. So a problem is not a physical problem with something. It has got 5 or 6 different people from different perspectives into that. So the way we have modeled that is we modeled that with personas. So a lot of our work is based on creating personas, both in my teaching in certain cases, and also in our product. Now the reason why that bizarrely works, and I've done it in client listings, is because people have a disconnect from a persona versus themselves. So if I say that I have a problem around the supply chain, I bring in 4 or 5 different people and I tell them in a group, and I start it, everybody is defensive about something. But I say that we are going to create these separate personas and each of them model something. And then everybody is sort of starting to engage with those personas and enrich those personas. So in the end, you actually have something which is richer. So for us, this is how we approach the problem. But we've done a lot of work in that. But the difference between usable and what I'm doing is I'm not looking at developers. And this is partly, again, why I had asked that sort of a leading question, more for my own understanding whether I'm missing something with that. But that is correct. So I think that it is a matter of finding the vertical. That exactly applies to your thing. Because what you are doing then is talking about the country. And I'm sure that also has many different aspects to that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So the physical manifestation of a context graph will obviously also be something that looks like a knowledge graph, or knowledge graph plus some kind of simulation world model plus some other thing, but it's still a digital manifestation, obviously.
Yes, so you're correct. So when we say, we both come from simulation worlds, correct? So the bit which I made originally the mistake was to think about it like a knowledge graph, but it is more like a simulation, because a simulation is an active thing, and the simulation then is based on the decisions, and that's a classic digital twin concept, correct? Mm-hmm. So the digital twin is essentially a sort of a movement of things. So if it is not moving, then there is no point making it into a digital twin. Mm. Of something of that nature, right? Yeah. So that's how I see that. That's why I like the analogy of the world model, yeah. Much more similar, much more focused. Although I take that point that it's not necessarily a physical thing, but the fact that it is a simulation is very good. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
And now we will have a break for 15 minutes. Hope there's some coffee left in there. Otherwise, we'll make more coffee. And after that, it will be Jaspur. He's getting ready. And Jóhann. And we're getting much more.
Hi, my name is Jaspur Højgaard. I work at Bischoff as well. I forgot the t-shirt, so but that doesn't mean I'm part of the team. I was mainly brought into the team as in a consulting capacity. So quite quickly after I started in September last year, I moved to consult the government of the Faroe Islands on looking forward to creating an AI strategy. I do that together with Oliver and a team from the customer. We started, as I said, in October and have worked until now and are going to continue work to kind of land on what do we do as a government. So if we have a look at what is it that we are working on, it's mainly been two phases. We had a pre-study that we had to do, and now we're moving on to the next phase, which is actually creating an AI action plan. So that's the use case. The team is actually changing a bit between these two phases. In the pre-study, we were a smaller core team. It was more technical. We observed that we lacked some capabilities in that team, so we've expanded on it with more business-oriented people, more economists, more lawyers, and so on, getting people with other core competencies added to the team. So yeah, there are many voices, and there is a lot of input. A lot of input comes from how we worked. We decided early on when looking at this as a national AI strategy, this is not a technical project, we said. We have to look at this as something that covers the entirety. And if we actually look at it from a social point of view or from a national point of view, I think maybe the most exposed to AI and the people that are have the most burning platform are probably teachers. Because if you look at their line of work, they've learned some skill that says this is how you teach people. Many that have worked with this for a lot of time, years, have created curriculums on how do we teach the students these things. And a lot of these curriculums, and especially the assignments and the exams, are getting challenged heavily with the new generative AI solutions. So it quickly became much bigger than just tech. So our process was, okay, let's go out and hear many voices. We want to hear from them all. So we had workshops that covered a lot of different areas. So we had to capture during these processes, during the workshops, because they were interactive, so people got to say what they were thinking about AI, the challenges, how the outlook was. We had to capture all of that somehow, and we had workshops across a lot of different topics. So we had to capture them all, and they all pointed in different directions because of the topics, but then again, they also had a lot of commonalities. So how do you capture all of this? How do you synthesize it? How do you find the commonalities? What helps everyone? What do we have to do specifically for that area? Which two areas maybe can have benefits, and so on. So that was kind of the outlook we had when we started doing this. So coming from Usable, of course, we chose Usable as a knowledge management system. And back then, we also didn't have a Usable chat, which someone has presented here. So things develop extremely fast in this space. What's the best tool and so on, everything changes. So expanding on that, why was Usable a good solution? Yeah, it's available wherever I work. Back when we started, as Oliver was talking about, we used Cursor. And the access to usable was mainly through MCP. So you had to have some tool that was able to use MCP to talk to usable. That was the main way of doing things back then. And we, as Oliver said, we used Cursor, and I also used it for developing other things for our company. But as things developed, I mean, since September, who's the leading actor in this space has changed probably 10 times. But because of smooth integration, I can switch tool and it doesn't impact the knowledge that we have gathered. I just plug in and it's readily available and it's really strong. And I don't have to say to everyone in the team, you must use this tool. Easiest way in, use usable chat. If you are set on, I want to use Copilot, we can make that work. If you're using Codex, Claude, Cowork, anything else, you can still plug in to the same knowledge, that we've gathered, and that's a really strong case, I think. Also, I mean, looking at it, I've always had the understanding if Microsoft did this right from the get-go, talking about LLMs, the harness, what Claude and OpenAI are doing. If Copilot was really good from the start, they would have been in a extremely good position, because adding economists, adding finance people to the project, they will always lean back to using Excel. Excel is, and Copilot is directly integrated into that. But we also saw when Claude for Excel came, for example, my understanding of it, at least, and I dare say I think it's for everyone, they were much better at it than the integrated Copilot was. So being able to hook into Claude, or even making our own embedded usable chat plugins to Excel, makes it, we can be everywhere. And again, it's really strong when we gather so many different aspects of knowledge and have to analyze it, synthesize it, make it into something actionable, looking forward also making it into an action plan that we actually can act on, making sure that it covers everything. So I think it's a really strong way of working. It's, let me just, as I said, whatever tool, because we started in Cursor, actually, started to use usable chat. I'm using whatever works well for the given task. It also comes to, when you do work like this, you do a lot of meetings, one-on-one talks with the people that might have a say on, okay, what about this in this area? Okay, you go out and speak to leaders, experts on that. Every meeting you have, you kind of try to say, okay, usually my way of working would then be, I go into usable chat and say, I'm going to have a meeting with this and this person. You can research him, but I'll provide you notes as we're speaking. Because in the Faroe Islands, you have the challenge. You cannot just say, okay, let's record a meeting and then we have the full transcript. Faroese isn't integrated well enough into all these models that we can do that. So
that's why we have the AI strategy.
That's exactly why we have the AI strategy. That's going to be a main goal of it. But then you provide small tidbits. We talked about this, main decisions, and then you have that documented. And it just compounds over the project. Okay, we spoke to Estonia. What did they say about this and this and this? It goes back, finds the meeting minutes from that. I don't have to have a neat order of files, or that someone else had this meeting and they provided the meeting minutes and I have to know where they put it and or find the email. I just query whatever tool I'm using, AI tool that is. What were the outcomes from the meeting with Estonia? Oh yeah, the outcomes were these and these and these and these. Okay, did we talk about that? Yes or no? It's all readily available, and it's a really strong way of working, I believe, and it's been hugely beneficial. So yeah, again about tools, the switching costs is basically zero. The switching cost is you have to know how to set up the MCP integration. That's basically it. Having done it a couple of times, it gets easier, but still it's a bit more on the technical side, I would say. But I think that's a pain that's worth going through, given the benefits that you get. Again, share. If someone else does it, I do it. Eller has, for example, done a lot of different analysis. He has held different meetings, written different notes on different things. Everything is gathered. Everything is available for me, as well as I move forward. As we move forward in the second phase, to do the correct synthesis. It's a strong thing. We have different members, and of course, full disclosure, it's with different levels of success that we get people to use this, because it's also just because people are different and involving a lot of different type of people, saying again, the economists, the lawyers, the more business-oriented people, and then we have developers at core like me and Oliver and so on. It's different how we approach things, how much we lean into our way of working, how open we are to new ways of working. And that's why Ajit said developers are bad customers. I'm not disagreeing, but the strengths that they have maybe is that they're quick to lean into new thoughts of thinking on, this is how I work, way of working, your process of working. They're quick to adapt, but it's also kind of the nature of the field that we're moving in. We have to move with time, otherwise we become useless, in lack of a better word. While the others haven't been challenged in the same way, I believe AI will challenge a lot of different fields in that way, and they will have to adapt to working in new ways. But we're not there yet, so that's why I'm saying it's with different success. Also just because they like better to work in Word or Excel. And then setting that up, making sure they use the AI fully. So it's some use it for everything, some use it but still everything is available for everyone. Also, when now onboarding the new people, what did we do? What were the analysis? How was that workshop? They can ask anything. It's readily available for them. I don't have to tell them everything, which is a really strong thing. So yeah, basically, yeah, it's looking at the real sources. It's not prompts that we have synthesized from our analysis and put into work. No, it is the knowledge that is available for everyone. It can be cross-cutting analysis. As I said, that workshop, different themes, but there are commonalities here. It can really look at a lot. Also, as Julius showed, he wanted to have, when he went into useful chat, he asked for something, and he chose specifically a quick model. Because he knew I'm specific, I'm gonna find the correct thing. But if I would have been looking across a lot of different fragments, a lot of different knowledge, and I wanted some synthesis and I wanted it to work well with this, I would probably have chosen a bigger model. But that's also something that we're free to do. And also, if we feel better doing that using flow of cowork, Codex, I've been using those heavily lately, moving maybe more to Codex now that GT55 came. I can do that to kind of get the deep analysis. Also, it's a good sparring partner. I try to say, okay, this and this and this, I get it. Are we missing something? Yeah, you maybe haven't considered this and this and this and this and this. But that, I think, again, that's where we still are needed, because it also becomes sometimes from me to the LLM, you actually missed that and that and that. And that's maybe the hardest thing when we get the solution and they say this is correct, the things that are missing, it's not that it's incorrect what it provides, it's just not complete. That's where we have to be precise in this line of work. So yeah, again, the quick 3-point conclusions. It's quickly available, also for new people joining the team, but also when we're expanding on such a broad level of different topics and knowledge, it's hard to remember everything. So it's really, really good to just be able to quickly ask, okay, I'm going to have a meeting now with someone from businesses. We had a workshop with them. What were the conclusions from back then? And then I get it. And yes, oh, then I remember. Yeah, good. Ready for the meeting. 2 phases. If we were switching the entire team, it would not be just you have to read the report and then you had synthesized level of knowledge. You could actually also just provide the entire workspace and say, here's the entire knowledge. You can dig into it yourself. Here's the synthesized part. You still have that. But if you want to query more closely yourself, you're welcome. So yeah, it's more a living memory than a report. Although we're still bound to the traditions of how do you do these things. So yesterday we held a presentation because we had delivered the PDF. But that's maybe also something that we can change a bit, saying at least if you do synthesis, make sure it's quickly available in Markdown format. That's maybe even tagged and so on. So everyone that wants to quickly can take this, put it into an LLM and understand what it is, and make that the common practice for national or government reports. You can do the beautiful PDF as well, because we still want to reach people, but also make a version that's Markdown and easily available for the AI. And for us, it could also be just access to a workspace with all the material. So yeah, the memory and the compounding process of work can become a deliverable as much as a report can. So that's kind of observations from me working with this level of knowledge work. I don't know if there are any questions.
I have one.
Yeah.
It's about how you pick a model. Is it like, okay, now the boss is around this model, they're becoming, it seems like they're the leader now, so we're gonna switch? Or do you like have big deliberations like, oh, it's such a hassle to change? Or do you have many of them at the same time? Or how is that?
I actually have many of them at the same time, and that was kind of the strong one of the strong things with this. It's easily available. So I didn't know. I actually noticed. I think it was last week. I actually used Codex primarily. I haven't done that 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I didn't notice until I already had done it. So that's kind of the strength of it.
So you don't really know specifically which model it comes from, just that it's good data.
Exactly. I mean,
that.
underlying, it is just an MCP connection.
Yeah.
And what it does inside usable is abstracted away from you. And I think that's one of the core strengths.
Right.
It's really good at finding the correct data. The data is stored at as you could see when Julius was presenting, it is in Markdown format. The fragments are in Markdown format. So they are readable and also easily understood by other technologies. So it's not like when we provided back, have searched, found the correct information and provided back to any of those systems, they need to understand this usable format. No, it's Markdown. So whatever tool I use is what I feel comfortable with. And if I'm not, sometimes, most of the time, it's maybe small queries, so it's easier to just say, okay, use a fast, typically haiku from Claude to do these things. I select that in usable chat, typically. If I want to do a presentation like this, it's of course not me that did that. It's Claude Cowork, for example, and that's typically an Opus model, the latest one.
If you want to have it understand Faroese or compose something in Faroese, what do you use?
Then I would use GPT-5.5 or Gemini, because those are the strongest ones in Faroese. A way of working back when Codex wasn't very good at making presentations, typically, and Google doesn't support Faroese at all, so as I couldn't use Multiple M or any of those. Then it was just, okay, I created it in Claude Cowork and then said, you do it in English because you're bad at Faroese, provide me with a translation file and a terminal command that I can paste for Codex to translate to Faroese. So it actually created a JSON file with all the texts, and then I just copy pasted a command from Claude Cowork into the terminal, pressed enter, and when it was done, I just went back to Claude Cowork and said, Codex says that it's done. Then it found the translated file and provided me with the Faroese slides. So, yeah.
So I think that I think that in this case, so you're talking about using lovable. Sorry, you're using usable. Yes. What am I saying? Usable with essentially Faroese applications, correct? So something like that. So in this case now, the interface is chat.
The interface is mainly chat in this case, yes.
Faroese?
I use it mostly in English, actually, but it's...
No, for the end users, what is it?
In this case...
you are the end user.
I am the end user, and the members of the project team are the end users. Because it's not something that we are exposing to the entire public. It is...
Okay.
So, but if it would become...
Not yet.
Available for the customer, it would just be dependent on which LLM they are using. If they are using...
Yeah, because my question wasn't more the LLM. My question was more because I do understand a little bit of the architecture.
Yeah.
You talked about this, correct? So essentially, you could have in theory a vector query,
yeah,
or relational query, or a knowledge graph query.
Yeah.
So how do you translate that? How do you tell people that they can ask this question? That was my real question. Because in the sense that if I don't know, I mean, this is not, if I don't know what I can do, I will do what I know.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah.
So you can look at the tax bot,
yeah,
which responds in Faroese.
Yeah.
And uses also usable as the knowledge base.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a different project, of course. But yeah, I mean, we have done it where it is a specific customer, the tax authority, that has a publicly available bot that uses usable again as the knowledge base, where then we can go in and ask, okay, I have these tax questions.
Right. So it's some kind of a template or examples or something.
Exactly.
So I guess it's a chat interface, so it can be blank, but typically you have some suggested prompts or suggested just to give people some idea.
Yeah.
Maybe Julius has something to add on that. What?
No, I think that possibly is the best I can think about.
And one minor, I mean, we can also add to this, what we could provide as a deliverable would be an expert saying, okay, that expert, because that's a sub feature of useful chat that you could make an expert say, okay, when you need to query this, ask that expert.
I'm just wondering about the data and if there's any limit to the data. So I have data all over. So I'm using so many tools. I'm using ChatGPT, Notion, Drive. I have audio files, I have podcasts, I have Descript. Like I have so many places with so much data. Can I just plug all of this into Usable, and is it going to be able to extract all this data?
In theory, yes.
But in practice, you do both. You put everything that's suitable for a knowledge base, like Usable, in there.
What is suitable?
Anything that can be saved as a markdown document or a file, but if you take what's not suitable is like operational logs. So if you have shitloads of data that's coming in all the time, you do not put that into the knowledge base, but you provide a link to that.
Okay, but like different tools that I'm already using, like I can connect ChatGPT and they can read all my conversations that I've been having with ChatGPT about my business and all my content and everything. But what about like Notion? I'm using Notion to lock down ideas and plan and stuff like that. Can I block Notion into Usable?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe I have one idea. Use something like Hermes that is connected to Usable and tell it, I have all this information in Notion. Please extract it and put it into Usable, and it will be good out.
Okay, so I'm going to have Hermes as a middle ground
Yeah,
to connect to all these different tools that I'm using.
Yeah.
And then extract that into Usable.
Yeah. I think that would be something you could do without any coding.
Yeah, that would support like transcribing.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten around to try Notion. It's what I'm trying to say. But if it does have an MCP connection, then you would also be able to connect Notion directly.
I have no idea.
No, exactly.
Notion has a usable connection, MCP connection that you can hook up on useful chat.
But what about like Canva? Okay, I use Canva a lot.
Yeah.
We also have an
Yeah, okay, so I could
Everybody uses it.
I could plug Canva into Usable.
Yeah.
Could I have a chat with Usable and say, hey, I have these ideas for a presentation or a content or post or whatever?
I think this is a very good bridge to the next presentation because
Okay.
Jóhann is going to talk about something very similar.
But there's one question that I also want to address it. But basically, Usable is more like the knowledge. It's not something you talk to like that. It is just the accumulated knowledge. And so the different tools you use, you speak to those as you do, but Usable just provides the context, and it makes sure that the context is known across all of these.
And then have an agent that can read all the context.
Exactly.
And that.
Exactly. You hook into the common memory, and if you want that siloed, you make sure to split it up into different workspaces so it knows, okay, this is the workspace and the knowledge of that, and that. Tags it, and so on. So that's what it is.
Maybe another quick.
Sorry, just one question. Yeah.
I just want to understand the national project and the end goal. What will it be for the average consumer? Does he have to access Usable to get the information, or can he go to whatever AI they uses and that one can access the information at Usable?
For the national AI project, those that will be able to access it in Usable will only be the customer at Talented Fair, probably. The public will probably be more in line of this is the final report, because in the end, it's going to be a list of initiatives. This is what we need to do for the Faroe Islands, because we're not looking at it as a usable thing. There we're looking at how can AI benefit the Faroe Islands. So we're abstracting completely away from usable. We're only using it as a tool in the process of working and creating the strategy.
But we could augment the website with some kind of interface that plugged into usable, but it will be totally invisible to the user that it is actually usable. That's behind.
Exactly.
One reason to do that could be that because there have been two large initiatives lately. One was the digitalization strategy, and you made it. And as a developer and IT person, sometimes you have questioned why have they decided that this was the route the Faroe Islands would go to. And with this AI initiative, we actually have the option to go into the context of the decision. Why was the decision made that?
So all the questions we got yesterday,
exactly.
the AI could answer.
Yes. Yeah. So it has actually more. So it's interesting if you could put that.
But just to quickly wrap up, the AI national strategy will be a document, more traditional form, I believe, making sure. But it's a list of initiatives that we need to do that need to be measurable, and we're looking more at what do we need to build up infrastructure, hardware infrastructure. I'll come to you. What do we need to build up hardware infrastructure? What do we need in order for Faroese language to become better in general for LLMs? Is there something we can do? Looking at the research, is there something we need to do in order to increase this AI skills for the general public? So they were looking way broader than that. So and it's more on a national level, and it's not vendor specific at all when it comes to the concrete initiatives of the AI strategy. That answers the question. So.
Yeah.
But we can also speak after.
It's a little bit of a different angle. I want to pivot a little bit to the topic you said about collaboration with government, various governments, because of course here we have safety, and if we want to implement some AI solutions or like inform people who work there how to maybe work in this environment, it can be a little bit tricky. And just a little bit, I'm very curious, how did it end up?
That's a great question. When we work with this one stated way of working, when we started the project was we're going to work AI first. Since we're going to do an AI action plan, we need to know what we're talking about, so we're working AI first. That needs to be something we do. That also means, and we stated that, we do not put personal data or sensitive data into this. The strategy itself isn't something that we want to be secret. And also, I love working in a way of process that says you can audit it, you can look at it. If you disagree, let me know. But I'm confident in what I'm doing.
But there is a challenge because when you have meeting notes, there are people there, and you note that that person said that, and so on, and you cannot give access to all of that. You have to have some filter between.
There is some filter, and there are some meeting notes that we've not put into the entire work. For example, steering group meetings and so on. We accept that there are levels, and we would probably, if we put everything into usable there, we would have put it into different workspace with different restrictions to users. But your question is completely valid, and how we approach it right now is, now that we're moving on to the next phase, the person that has that's going to help us with the laws and security and so on, we've actually included the head of the data protection office. So the CEO there has become a part-time part of the team to make sure that we start off on a great note. So that's kind of, we're looking for, so we're trying to make sure that it's really broadly anchored. Also through the steering group, we've included the steering group that covers all the biggest sector in the country, so that they know what we are planning to do. So when the initiative comes, it's not secret to them. They've been in on it from the get-go. With the data protection office included, it makes it more believable that, okay, there are things that we can actually manage and do. Also in regards to safety, because that is the first question everyone asks. Can we do this? How about data? And that's what stops everyone. That's also what we acknowledge right away. What people don't know, they're not sure what they can do and what they can't do, and that's actually what in the end just stops them from doing anything. It makes them passive. It's easy for many of us to kind of say, oh, we're doing this. We started from a clean slate, and it's a technical product. If our core business was patient information at the doctors, and we had loads of history and good profile people, our approach would be more careful. But it's kind of finding out and including the correct people right away okay, we can say, this is what we can do. And as I said, it's at that level. Okay, we need to invest in hardware because we don't have enough hardware to process it in this on the Faroe Islands, and for that data we need to do that. Okay, we need to invest in this hardware. It's an initiative. It will cost that and that and that. It should be done in year that. So that's kind of the action plan as we look at it. So more high level, and the different sectors will then also have their own AI strategies. I mean, the education has its own, probably the health sector has its own, the social services has its own, and so on.
Do you have user roles and permissions, or like who can add knowledge to the shared?
Yes.
Workspace?
For workspaces, we do have some roles. They're not greatly defined.
They're greatly defined.
Oh, they're defined. I think better that answer, yeah.
So you can read or you can write,
yeah,
or you don't have access.
Yeah.
And if you wanted, we consider to have more granularity to it, but it doesn't make sense when you have a brain like that, because everything is interlinked. So you couldn't just say in the workspace, Peter has only access to this and Anna has only access to that. That doesn't make sense. So the domain is a workspace, and if you have access to the workspace, you have access to everything. Isn't that correct, Julius?
What can be said on that is, if you want something, you have this workspace that can also be added to collections and so on. So you have inside a workspace, you have collections. For example, we had a workshop with the public sector. I say, this is a collection that contains all the fragments that are related to a public sector. I could create a new workspace and then link all those fragments over to the new workspace and give someone access. Then they would have access to only the public sector workshop fragments and not everything else.
So that's the key point. This access is defined by workspaces.
It's on the workspace level that we're defining these.
And you can simulate.
Yeah. Exactly.
One way direction, one workspace.
Making sure that it's written in this. In the original workspace, we would make changes, but you would make a symboling. So this fragment that we're working on, or the collection we're working on, it is visible in the other workspace for that user. And then we could add multiple users to that and say, okay, but that's the level we're working on. Yeah.
I'm very sorry, but time is up.
Yeah. So
we can continue for hours. Thank you. Jóhann?
Speed runner.
We saved the last for best. Best for last. Last for best.
No pressure. All right, there we go. So yeah, I will be talking about how because we were trying to figure out what should I be doing, like what should I be doing for this, and I had zero time to do this. So I just went into what I know and what I've been experimenting with lately. So which is to use Usable as a game development tool, and I'll lean more into generally how to use Usable in this context and not like how to program something in a game. So the first challenge was to move from programming to using an agent to program everything for you. Having multiple years of game development, it can be a bit hard to just like give up that thing that you have done for years and just hand it over to an agent, and then you just sit there and review everything he does and tell him if he's doing it wrong or not. But once you get past that point, which I think everyone basically needs to do at some point, you just start to realize how much faster you're actually working. So the first attempt, so I'll go through some scenarios that I've been experimenting with. So the first attempt was at the Global Game Jam last year, where Hannah and I, who was sitting back there, decided to see if we could build a game using Claude code and Usable, and that was it. And we built a game called Infinite Memory, and yes, that is the name, not like actually solving infinite memory problems. And what this game was an IO mobile game. So it's a game where hundreds of people can play at the same time, live. And the game was that you're playing Memory, the classic game where you have to flip cards. So you can see what other people's are flipping and trying to steal from them and stuff like that. And if you guys want to try it, there's a QR code. It's live at the moment. It's been running for, I don't know, since January. And to start out with, the reason we picked this project specifically was because we just leaned into what we already have in Usable, which is all the knowledge we accumulated since we started using Usable, like how we develop back then, Flowcore. But yeah, like so we used Next.js, the general tech stack that we had learned to use and like built a very strong foundation for how to build good Next.js applications. But the real magic comes from using Claude code and Usable. And what I mean by that is that this is the general flow that you go through, which is that's me, implement the task, Claude code checks the knowledge, like where he needs to go ask Usable and how to like communicate with Usable. And then he asks Usable, how do I do this specific task? Where he learns all the standards, security standards and coding structure, basically everything you have to do in order to make a solid product. But the more important part, a more interesting part is that while he was developing a task, so I told him to just find this task in Usable and then implement it. While I did that, I in parallel started just communicating with him on how do we solve specific issues in this game. So for example, one of them was infinite scrolling, which is that in the game you can just keep scrolling and it will loop back around to give the sense that it's massive. As well as flipping of cards, which is, if anyone knows HTML, there's a difference, there's a canvas and a CSS. And one's really good for one thing and the other is really good for something else. And I needed both. And they do not play together. So I have to figure out how the heck do I do this, where I take the card, you press it, it goes up, flips around, and gets placed nicely back down. And the way we did this is that I do not use Usable chat as a one prompt. I just fire it off and then he figures everything out and then I just close my eyes and hope that it's okay. Instead, what we do is that we have a dialogue with the chat. So as you can see, we would go back and forth. He would mention some solution that we could try and use, and I would push back that I didn't like that idea, and then he might suggest something that's even better than what I could think of. And then we would just pop back and forth for like 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how complex this issue was. And once I was satisfied, I told him, can you now document this? which was then stored in usable. And once we got to that task, which was like ahead of time, I could just tell him, all right, continue on to the next task. You have all the information that we've been discussing beforehand. And that's in Claude, not in usable chat. The usable chat was just to figure out how the heck we solve this problem. And Claude Code was specific to just implement the thing. So that was just building a web app. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to say, sure, we have this amazing flow core workspace where we have all the knowledge we accumulated, but what if I start from scratch? What if I don't have all this knowledge just in usable? So what I wanted to do was that I set up a game dev workspace where I defined how you are a good games programmer, what you have to consider when you make games, from how to design a game, what feels good in a game, the concept of game loops, like can you start and end the game, how do you end it, and stuff like that. Which ended up with me having something called a game concept, which is often used for, you guys might know something called a napkin idea. It's when you're at a restaurant, you get a really brilliant idea, and then you just write it on a napkin, and you bring the napkin home, or like a coffee filter or something, right? So it's like a throwaway idea that pops into your head, and you just, I want to document this. So one example here is that Hannah had an idea for a game, which we haven't implemented, but she just jotted down, you talk to usable chat saying, I have this game idea, I don't really have it fleshed out, I just want to make this, and you win the game like this, and you can be X amount of players, and I don't really care about the technical part, I just want to document it. What I did then is that we have a skill in this workspace where I basically tell him, convert it to what you call a GDD, which is a game design document, which has everything from what the characters look like, the motivation of the characters, what the world looks like, what mechanics are in the game. Can you walk? Can you jump? Can you lose health or take damage or whatever, right? And what he does when you communicate with him about this is that he generates a million questions. He keeps asking you just constantly. For example, all right, what happens when the enemy touches you? I was like, well, I guess I didn't think of that. Well, I guess I take damage when he hits me. And then he goes, all right, you take damage. What does the health look like? Do you want it at the top? Do you want it at the bottom? Is it a percentage? Like, he basically just annoys you relentlessly until you've given him enough information to go, all right, this is actually a game that we can build now.
So this skill is in Claude, or this skill is still in Claude?
This skill has been developed specifically in usable, and I can pull it into Claude.
Right.
So Claude can like pull on it, but this is specifically only usable chat. I haven't even touched Claude in this case. And again, you could do this in Claude as well, and then just push it up to usable.
No, so it's in usable.
Yeah.
So you
And
could use Codex or whatever.
Yes, the most important part here is that he connects back to usable so that he can start storing all these information, like all these documents. And what he ended up doing is he creates a design document, a bunch of features, and a crap ton of tasks based on all this information. And then the question became, all right, sure, now you have a task list, but how can you make sure that this actually lasts? Because the issue in general with AI is that if you just tell him to build something, he'll build it, and it looks fine, it works fine, but the second you actually want to expand on it, it just collapses within a few seconds because the code has been written terribly and it hasn't been designed to scale. So this is where more or less I came in, as well as other people that inspired me, which is that I've just filled this workspace with knowledge on how, like, what standards to use, how do you program, and what's general concepts in programming you need to consider when you develop things, how to use this specific language, how do you interact, or how do you write this specific programming language, and then moving further and further down into the specific development tool that you're using. For this case, it's Unity. And from all this, when he starts to write code, he always checks the standards first, making sure that he's not breaking any of them. so that I know for a fact that the code that he writes is strong, reliable, and expandable. And the fun part is, so I've kind of been talking about this entire time, is that as you develop things, as you can see, I have something called recipes and solutions. So recipes is just, how do I build a camera controller so I can move the camera around in the scene? Or how do I build like an enemy spawner or whatever it is, right? As well as the solutions is, I ran into this issue, we got it fixed, can you please document how you solved it? So that when it happens again in a different game or during this development cycle, he'll remember it and be able to just tell you, oh, it's probably X, Y, Z, because you already told me beforehand. So by doing this, you create like a continuous flow that makes your software better over time. Like he gets better and better at making video games. So for example, someone I helped recently had to make a camera controller so you can move around the camera, move around the world, and move the character around. I developed that in, usually it would take 5 to maybe 8 hours to do, whereas now it took, I think, an hour and a half. And that was me going in and testing it as well, and making sure everything felt right, and they tweaked the numbers and stuff. And next time I do it, it will take a second to get done, because he already has the knowledge on how to do it. So my workflow now becomes, I develop through Clock Code or Codex or whatever agent you want to use. He connects to the development tool, like the game engine, which is in this case Unity, using MCP. I go in and into, for example, Unity, and make the small, like, creative adjustments. Like, oh, I think the character moved too fast, because I'm actually play testing and making sure it feels right. Whereas he takes the heavy load of actually programming everything. And then we both use usable. So Claude uses it to gather knowledge as well as create knowledge, and I go in to discuss with him, like in a clean environment where I can just talk about concepts on how do we solve this issue. And then I thought I had one more thing, because now it was so easy to build things that I wanted to see, could I take usable and shove it into Unity, into an environment where it technically does not belong? Because these tools are generally not made for, you can access a web browser and you can like type a text into it and then it like feeds back into the game. And it's very hard to do because it's not built for it. So during the Tonik game jam last week, we decided to build something called the Undelivered, which is just purely an experiment to see, could I take usable and integrate it into Unity and not have to stick with like a usable chat view? Because, you know, when you're making a game, you want to capture the feeling of what the game is and not have it look really nice and then there's a usable chat window on the side which doesn't match the colors or the feel or anything, right? And that's actually what we managed to do, which was a lot of fun. So if I just turn this on, you can see that the chat itself, like the chat window, is in that box right there. The input field is at the bottom. Again, this does not look like usable chat whatsoever, but because of how extendable usable is, I managed to just connect directly into usable and then just start rendering things the way I wanted it to be rendered. And the most fun part is that usable has something called, we didn't really touch on embeddable usable chat, but you can embed usable into your software, which allows him to communicate with your software as well. So as you can see, the character changes his emotions as I was chatting with him, depending on what I said. And that is because usable chat is actually able to tell Unity, all right, he said this, evaluate what he said, and based on what he said, call this tool inside Unity to set the mood. So he has 16 moods, I believe, so you can make him vomit and stuff as well. And what this game was that you're basically an interrogator and you have to try to break him to confess to his crimes. And one participant managed to do it, and I haven't done it yet because he just starts shouting that he wants his lawyer and stuff. And again, because this is embeddable chat, we made a custom expert into this chat where it gives him the context of who is he, how should he act, and does he need to be really defensive, and what happens when he gets really defensive. And what we could do easily in the future is, if he says he wants to bring his lawyer in, you spawn a second chat, and the lawyer will intercept all your messages and be like, no, my client does not need to answer that question. Like, you can just keep building on top of these things. So this is the general flow of it, right? That you can trigger the mood through tools the usable chat can connect to. The message itself can be sent via the chat at the bottom by just sending the message to the embeddable usable chat, and then it can render a response. And we explicitly made it sure that you cannot see previous messages, because this is like a dialogue. If you want to remember what he said, you have to write it down on a piece of paper or something. Like, you actually have to take notes. You can't just scroll up to the top and say, oh, that's what you said, because that's not how an actual interrogation works. So it's just to demonstrate that you can even just cut off, like, I don't want to see the entire chat. I want to just see the one part that's important for making this game feel like we wanted it to feel. So my conclusion was that it is very viable to usable to make games. And if you use Unity, that's one option. There's Unreal Engine, there's Godot, there's lots of engines you can use. And generally, the reason people want to use game engines is because you have more like creative control rather than having to sit there and like, look at the code. You can actually move things around and evaluate and animate and make it feel good. And then, yeah, apparently it also works to integrate usable chat directly into a game. And now I'm worried what we'll think of next, because now we can kind of just do whatever we want. And that was my presentation, if anyone has any questions.
So, but you're talking about two different things. So using usable embeddable chat in a game.
Yeah.
But you jumped over the using usable embeddable chat as a tool to, or as a way of controlling Unity as well.
Yeah.
So you did that as well.
Yeah. So with usable embeddable chat, you have ways of like registering whoever wants to connect the tool into your chat. So you can use a usable embeddable chat in it's a very fun sentence to say, but you can use it in a website where you can say, for example, Luteka uses it, the app that we're using at Tonik, which is, I got a list from Greg that said, can you add these 20 people to the system? And I was like, I cannot be asked to sit there and press new person, fill out information, save, new person. So instead, I just took the 20 people he sent me, pasted it into usable chat, like the embeddable, like the one that was in Luteka, and told him, can you just add these 20 people for me? And then in 5 seconds, he had added 20 people, as opposed to me having to sit there for 30 minutes just to get all these people in. And it's the same concept. Luteka has tools that we built that allows usable chat to connect into the website and be like, create person, update person, delete person, or whatever it is, right? Same thing here, only in a completely different environment, because this is C# and not JavaScript. So just really.
But it still works. But there was a question earlier about could it work in Canva like that?
Yeah, definitely, because it's the same concept that you can just connect. If you take the chat, you can connect into other tools, and then you just present those tools so the usable can see them. Someone will. Brian might be bored, so you can do it.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So as you're developing, and you're using the chat, usable chat, and that's talking to Paul, and then it's rendering the fixes, like you say, oh, it's moving too fast, slow it down, and talks to Paul, fixes code, renders, and then test the code. Like, how is it? Are you talking to your phone? Like, how are you working and testing?
Generally, what I do is that Claude is running on my computer in the terminal, and then I have just Unity open. And then I just sit there and press play, and I just adjust things, and then I just pop back in and say, this isn't good enough, and then pop back in. So I just alt-tab basically between the two.
How long does it take?
Well, the funny thing is that he's using a tool in Unity that I never really used, but I always wanted to use, but I never really got into it, which is that it optimizes how fast it compiles, like the code, so you can try and run it. And because he does all of this manual work for me, it usually takes from 10 seconds to compile to 2, maybe 1 second, because he's optimized it. Like I could do it myself, but it's just really tedious to do this, whereas he can just, churn through it really quickly. So yeah. Any other questions?
No, I also had a similar question to the workflow. I mean, how exactly is that interaction working? Because I think this is quite unique because obviously they don't do things because it's C# and things like that. But also I had another question because much more kind of basic is that when you start this kind of a workflow, you're starting with a chat user, correct? Yes. And at what point do you define the skills? Or what do you know? How do you know that you might need some new skills? If you do.
Yeah. One example I can use is that the workspace itself I created the workspace, and then you have all these boxes like where I store all the information, like GTD, game concept, and stuff. I actually didn't create any of the containers either. I just sat in the usable chat and said, all right, I want to build this type of workspace. I want to get this out of it. And then we just sat back and forth and communicated until I was satisfied with, all right, we need these boxes to make this thing work. And then I probably sat for like 30 minutes just trying to hone in what it is that I wanted with him. And then once that was done, he just generated the entire thing. And it's kind of the same thing that when I feel, well, sometimes he actually offered it himself, but when I feel that I could do this faster, I will tell him, can you create a skill for this specific problem that I have to do over and over and over? For example, what should we say? Like regenerating the AI pathways in like a scene or like a level, right? Because you changed the level and now you want to regenerate where the AI can walk. Instead of me having to open Unity, find the object and configure everything and press bake, so it bakes it into the scene, I just create a skill called regenerate pathways or something like that, right? And then the AI itself can just figure out, oh, I changed a bunch of things in the scene, I'll just call the skill, and then he gets all the knowledge on how to do that, and then he just dives in.
You do it on the fly.
Yeah.
You do it as you have.
I generally don't create skills from nothing, because the skills I have created from nothing I tend not to use necessarily that much. But when I create them as I'm thinking of them while I'm in the weeds of things, I feel like they generally work way better because they have really strong context as to why the skill matters. Because in general, I think with AI, it's that asking him something and getting an answer is not as good as asking him and then giving him a reason for why you asked. That is really powerful, as opposed to just, can you tell me this? I can say, can you tell me this because I'm struggling with X, Y, Z.
Would you define the skill library in advance?
In what, sorry?
Like a skill library in advance?
I have some skills that I've made in advance, but they're more for just admin things. But in general, I would have the skills get generated as I'm using them. And then for the next project, I already have these skills to use for working even faster.
Okay, thanks.
But you're accumulating knowledge. That's the point.
Yeah, as well as learning what takes long and what doesn't take long and generate skills based on those requests. We only have one question.
Yeah, you're collecting all this knowledge and memory. Can I self-host it, or when is this all at your servers, and can I extract it
and use it yourself?
All the values actually this memory, right? The models are replaceable.
Yeah, and I've filled it with everything that I've myself burned from a lot making games, because games are very different from general software because it's just so generic. in what it is that you're actually trying to do. Whereas a software is kind of follows a very linear curve of this is what we need to get done for it to be good enough. So yeah, there's a lot of knowledge in there, and I have been thinking of taking a lot of the recipes and stuff and like moving them into a public one, so anyone can tap
Yeah,
in.
I think for my own safety that this to me becomes very valuable. But
Mm.
now, if you close my account because you don't like me anymore, have I lost all of this? Or can I extract it?
Yeah, and usable because it's in. You can like pull it down. You can take an AI and tell them to pull everything down if that's the case.
Into files.
Yeah, because they are just marked down files.
Everything is marked down, so you can at any point take everything down.
Yeah.
So that's
And one last question, very quick. Can you delete something when you fragment something wrong?
Yes.
You just
I have
delete
experience.
it, or-
I have experienced where he made something that I didn't like, but he documented it. So I just told him, "Can you go and update it to this fix?" And then he went in and fixed it.
Thank you, Jóhann. This concludes the inaugural Usable Fragments conference. This was the very first one. And as I started by saying, we
next time.
we will multiply it by some factor. We started 12 people this morning. I think we've been like 17, 18, 20 throughout this morning. So whether that will be times 10, 200 people next year, or 2,000, we will see. But thank you, everyone. If you want to hear more from the development team, we have a session tomorrow at Tonik, 12:50 at our offices as a pop-up event. And I will also have a talk about memory and knowledge and usable later in the afternoon. So thank you, everyone, and see you soon.